All right. Good morning. So, welcome to your last Coffee with Miss Cook of this school year. I can hardly believe it's May. And as always, just a few housekeeping items up top. If attendees want to stay on mute while we do some content and do a little panel with our senior parents, we will then, as always, move into Q&A and folks can ask questions live or in the chat. We are recording. I will distribute to everyone later in the week. And as always, this is meant to be an hour-long program. So if we're out of questions before 9, fabulous. But if they're still coming in, we are going to have a hard stop, and we'll keep the conversation going in other venues. So a few words from me, reminders, updates on what's happening with college advising before we get to our fabulous panel. I know many of you went on college visits during spring break. I've been hearing about them in my spring junior appointments, which is great. Sounds like folks are starting to develop some preferences and perhaps even front runners. And if you didn't do visits, that's okay. You're not behind. There is time. Things will still be happening over the next few months. But I am having meetings with all of your kids right now. I'm probably about halfway through the class. I have a ton this week. And just so you know what's happening in those meetings, we are talking about any research your students have done, looking at SCORE. Hopefully there are some schools in there. We are deciding on who will be writing teacher recommendations, or at least who your students are going to ask. And they do need to make those requests by the end of the school year. I've now launched the college essay unit in all of the English classes. I was just in the final senior English class yesterday. And so they're going to be wrestling with this over the next few weeks. I will just say one quick piece of advice to parents. If you are interested in what they're writing, if you happen to read their essay and you are not excited about it, that is typical right now. This is practice. This is a first run at things. It might not be the right topic, and that's okay. They'll get that feedback from me or their teacher. They might decide along the way it's not the right topic, but they are going to wrestle with this first round of practice. And sometimes there's also a topic they need to kind of get out of their system before we move on and find the right one. So you do not have to email me in a panic that this absolutely can't go to colleges, because it won't in whatever format it's in. No one's done at the end of this unit. So, and then I will also say we have a second and final questionnaire that's going to be sent out to students tomorrow. It's shorter than what they did in the winter, but I do ask for some updates on things like what are they doing this summer? Have they developed more thoughts on their major? Just some more information. So as I start working on drafts of their counselor letters over the summer, I've got all the latest. That also needs to be done by the end of the year. And then finally, we have a class meeting on Friday, a junior class meeting, but we will have a couple of seniors, much like we're doing here this morning. And with that, where I'm facilitating sort of a peer-to-peer discussion about what just happened, advice they might have, things they wish they'd known, etc. So a lot of college activity this week in particular, but certainly in towards the end of the year here. And then I will leave you alone for a while in June. We will all just rest and enjoy the beginning of summer. But of course, the college process will continue in July and August. I do work through the summer, and so we'll stay connected on writing and Zoom meetings if you want, and all the rest. So, given the pace of these activities, the scope of these activities, you might be wondering how you're going to get through the next year. So I thought this would be a good time to hear from parents who have crossed the finish line as of May 1, at least with the current child that was in the process. And I'm delighted this morning to have 3 folks that were willing to chat with all of you. Carrie Barlas, who is the mother of Ryan Schwartzman, Modi Baharev, I hope I'm saying that right. That's how okay, great. Who's a father of Eden, and also Zoe, who's a sophomore. So we'll do this again soon. And Patty Jaselowitz, mother of Etan, and also Eliza, alum, class of 23. So I think we are finally finished with the Jaselowitz family, but you are welcome to call me if you need to have a hotline at JCHS post-graduation. So we're going to do a little bit of a panel. I have just a couple of questions that I'm going to ask to all of them, and then open it up just for some Q&A if folks have questions beyond what we start out talking about. So I want to start back in 11th grade, right? Where all these parents are right now. And so have you think about a year or so ago. And I'm wondering if each of you could touch on, or, two or three of you, as how and when did your child really get engaged with the process? Because some are quick to jump into it, some drag their feet a little bit. If there was something, whether it was a visit or a bit of information or a conversation with me, something that kind of helped spark them to get really going. So, who wants to start? Yeah, Patty. Great.
Yeah, I shall start happily. Hi, everybody. I know I speak for Carrie and Moti that we know how you feel, and we have been there. And I have two very different kids, so I've been there twice in very different ways. And, it's emotional for us. And I just wanted to say that ahead of time. But you also have parents who have gone through this before, all the alumni parents. I'm sure would be happy to speak to you if there's a specific college. I know Lauren will bring that up. But anyway, you're not alone. And most importantly, you're not alone because of the wonderful Miss Cook. And she is able to answer any of your questions. And most importantly, she is able to be the go-between so you don't have to nag your child. I had two children who were pretty hesitant, didn't want to go on tours early or pretty much ever until after they got their acceptances. And so that was stressful. And again, just relying heavily on what Ms. Cook said to finally at least get them to go, locally to see different kinds of schools. And Eliza didn't get in the game until like literally spring of her senior year. And Aton got in much earlier and more in the fall of his sophomore year. But this time last year, he wasn't looking into anything.
Accurate.
Yeah, yeah, and hi everyone. It's so good to be here, and I will echo what Patty said about Lauren Cook. She is a true ally and partner. So I get emotional just thinking about this whole process. I've got two graduating seniors, by the way. I've got Ryan, who's graduating from JCHS, and our older son Drew is graduating from college. He's at Brown. And so it is, wow, what a tender time. And for you all as well. And I would say that Ryan also was slow, kind of slow to get engaged in the process, though true to form for him. And so we kind of honored that in him. We did a college tour, I guess it was November of his junior year, just to get a flavor of some schools down in Southern California with a friend and his friend's mom. And I think that got him starting to tune in a little bit to the idea of looking at colleges. And so I don't know if there was any one moment, but again, it was true to form for our kid to kind of take it in like little nibbles along the way. When he had to kind of dig in and write his essay, I think that also made it real for him to take a look at who he is, again, in his own way. He's not a writer. He has a learning disability in writing. So that whole process was, could have been challenging for him. But I think that got him connected to the process a little bit, and helping to sort of define who he is and what, what could be interesting for him in a college.
So if I can chime in, I would definitely echo my friend's kudos and accolades to Lauren, who's been an amazing partner, but most importantly, not just for our kids, but for us. Um, and I would say I jotted down a few notes, but one kind of big one is trust the system and trust the process, right? It's a marathon. It's not a linear engagement. So they sometimes engage, they sometimes disengage. There's a lot of growing and fear that has to do with, okay, where the realization that they're leaving the house and they're moving on to the next phase. Our kid, my daughter she engaged early on as far as conversation with Lauren and starting to kind of evaluate, but then we didn't do anything. I think during the Passover break, we just drove by some local schools, only two, and she didn't really like what she saw, but that helped her understand that she's not looking for a big school. She wanted a smaller setting. She wanted potentially to engage with the teachers more. So that kind of helped kind of set her mind as to some of the criterias. And then the big one for us, I think, from an overall engagement, also us as parents, was during the summer, where we did an East Coast tour, her and I, for about 10 days and visited 9 schools. So that was a lot. And that kind of helped us also kind of sift through the marketing and kind of really start getting the essence of school. So I would say, as far as kind of the start, don't expect your kid, or it's okay if, from my perspective, if they're not all in day one. It's a process.
Mhm. Thank you all. And yes, I'm seeing that too. I thought about this just yesterday with some of the juniors I met with, that they were markedly different in this meeting than they were back in December or January, in that they were more engaged, they were a little more locked in, a little bit more informed. Clearly, just the peer culture is moving that way. But it is a process, takes time. So, as you think through making the application list and completing paperwork and making the visits, I can't believe you did 9 schools in one trip. That's not advisable. But you've got a child who isn't going to rebel right in the middle of that. So that's great. Um, I'll ask this in 2 parts. What were some of the things that you found challenging? Was there anything as you went through the actual application process in the fall? Moments where it was like, ugh.
I could start. So my so we were lucky, I think, with Eden, as far as kind of leaving her the writing and the application. She didn't need too much supervision or a lot of mental support, and kind of going through the frustrations at times. And but that was it. I think the challenge, and in hindsight, I think the one of the more critical aspects of the process is really trying, again, with the limitation of them being juniors or even seniors. They're still chicks, and they don't know what they want to do and where they want to what they want to be when they grow up, which is great, which is fine and great and expected. But having, selecting those schools that they want to apply, I think that was the most, in hindsight, also the most critical part, is to try, if you can, to narrow down the category of schools that you're looking at. For us, early on, again, not having experience or having a different, not growing up here and having a different mindset of what a liberal art is, I thought it was one thing. And then when we researched more, it was really towards what she was looking for, which was both STEM and non-STEM and kind of everything in between, and exploring and not knowing what she, as we like to call it, not undecided, but multi-decided. Um, but also having more options and not just sticking to one, and really having that safe or likely or stretch, and having and I can talk about more in the kind of, once you get the answers and you start making choices. It was great to have options, because again, this is a process and their mind can change, and you don't want to find yourself in November and December where they have a whole different notion of where they want to go, but they haven't applied to some of those schools. Um, so I think the difficult part was more, I mean, I still have this. This was to me the aha moment when I took this and started researching. So I took up an active role in helping her have options. Again, not deciding for her. That was her process, and she made it very clear from the get-go. But giving her, what about this one? Should we go online and research that school? Should we go on a virtual tour? And I think that was very helpful. But it gets overwhelming because there are 3 or 4 thousand schools, as you say, as you told us. So there's a lot of options.
Yeah, and I'll build on what Moti shared in that I think one of the challenges was to get Ryan to dig into the research process a little bit more and to own that, because I too took an active role in partnership with Ms. Cook, and also just out of interest and having gone through it before with my older son. And, to get Ryan to sit with the FISC guide, to really dig into the website, to kind of make it a process for him. We told him to start a Google Doc and put notes in there. And again, this kid is not a writer. It's not his go-to, but so I think it wasn't like a huge challenge or a huge struggle. And it all worked itself out in time. But I think that was part of it, for him to really own that process and to say, okay, yes, the school does speak to me, or no, it doesn't. And then the other thing I'll say is, surprisingly, and I don't know, maybe this is controversial. The application process, it doesn't need to be stressful. That application, putting in those one lines about what your kids' activities are. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm not supposed to say this, Lauren, but like, use ChatGPT at least to give it a shot, or to clean it up, or, I mean, that does not need to be stressful. It's like writing a quick resume, and, it's good practice for your kid to be able to figure out how to say something briefly. The essay too, it's their essay, it's their work. And to the extent that you can distance yourself from the essay, I really advise you to do that. Even if your kid is not a talented writer, or if they struggle with it, find a third party, a friend, to have the friend talk them through it. But to the extent that you can distance yourself from the essay, I think will really create more harmony for your kid and for yourself and for your relationship.
Absolutely. And I do want to jump in and just say that absolutely the activities section, which there is one on both the Common application and the University of California application, where it's like a resume, but you're describing, various clubs and activities and leadership roles. That is an excellent place to think about using generative AI, if you were going to use generative AI anywhere. I will also say that as I was in English classes, I very much this year purposefully took a 5-minute detour into why generative AI is not something that you should be using with your essay, and for all sorts of reasons. But if folks need the stick rather than the carrot, the biggest one is that we don't know how colleges are using AI detectors at this point. And a lot of them are making statements about there is, absolutely no tolerance for, AI use in the essay. So there's lots of other reasons and ways in which, obviously spell check and things can be utilized. But yes, co-sign on everything Carrie just said. Patty, I don't know if you have anything to add about challenges.
Yeah, both of our kids wanted like us to have like no input in their essays. I haven't seen any essays ever. And so that was very anxiety producing for me, not because I'm a good writer, but I just want to make sure that it's, where it's supposed to be at any given time. And so I lean heavily on Miss Cook for those sort of things. And if I'm concerned that, either Eliza or Eton were behind in something, I would just reach out to Miss Cook. And again, like she said, carrot stick. Miss Cook is happy to be the stick, so you don't have to be the stick. There's already so much stress in this process. Your kid is leaving home. It's very emotional. And obviously for them, everything's emotional. So I just highly recommend using Miss Cook when you're feeling anxiety, because you don't really want it to get on them. We want the process to be as enjoyable for them as possible. I also, try to encourage them to just look online, like not like pressure, because Aton, like when Eliza was looking 2 years ago, I'm like, you can just start to look. And he heard that as I was pressuring him to start looking when he was in 10th grade. And I was like, not at all. I just like, when there's no pressure, you can look, so you can just take the any kind of urgency or whatever out of it. So those were my things.
Yeah, great. Yes. And I will just echo that. Some students feel really private about their writing, and that's okay. They can't be private from me with it. So, I mean, every once in a while, there's a student who submits something that I haven't seen, and God bless, good luck. But for the most part, I am working with them on it. And if they don't want your eyes or your opinions or whatnot, because some of this is vulnerable and all the rest, that's fine. Do as Patty did, shoot me an email here and there and just say, like, is it on track? How are we doing? Is the writing okay? I am happy to affirm for you, or, raise the issues of, we might need to be tugging them along a little bit harder. But they will always be sharing things with me, and typically their senior English teacher as well. And I do encourage them to not have a ton of hands in the pie, because it can start to become a sort of Frankenstein piece of writing if 5 different people are commenting on it and editing it and all the rest. It really dilutes their voice. So I showed them a meme yesterday I have of like a pizza that it says on it, thanks for all your help with the edits. And one half of the pizza has sprinkles and M&Ms, and 1/4 has a rotisserie chicken sitting on it, and another piece has some slices of pepperoni. So nobody wants the M&M pepperoni rotisserie chicken essay, if that made any sense. Okay, so I would now love to know some rewarding moments, some high points in all of this, anything to reflect on, whether it was moments of growth or moments where they got a win.
There's a lot of moments throughout the process, or at least we also try to make the process enjoyable and fun. No, so there's a lot of fun in just going with your kid on a tour or traveling and making that a memorable experience, and spending time at every night after you've gone through a tour and just jotting down your thoughts or doing a table and at least capturing that moment where so it obviously could be a very stressful process and very daunting for everyone involved. And it's also a process for the parents, we realize, right? Especially, not especially, but it's our first. So it's the first time you kind of going through that realization that they've reached that age. But I think trying to make, obviously, when they get a yes, that's obviously an enjoyable moment, whether they want that school or they decide by the time that yes arrived that there's no way they're going and they're so adamant, and then the next day they're, well, maybe I can consider, right? So there's a lot of that through the process, and as experienced parents, you kind of take it all. But yeah, I would say just try to make the process enjoyable. To me, it was very it's a very binary at the end, right? It kind of worked throughout this process. First of all, I realized at some point, well, or at least obviously not at some point, but it's um, very binary. At the end, you're going to one school, so you can have 5 schools, and you got yeses from 3, and but at the end, you just say so. That whole process of yes, you got accepted to a school and you're not gonna go, but you got that recognition, or even when they got a no, right? That's okay. That's part of the process. So yeah, just make it into as much as you can. Um, Emphasize on the bright spots and make it a fun, memorable experience.
Yeah, and I'll say I don't know, don't shoot me for saying this, but it doesn't have to be stressful. I mean, it really doesn't. Yes, your child might feel it because of outside pressures or their own internal pressures that they put on themselves, but there is so much abundance in this process, and particularly because of where our students are and where we are as a community here with JCHS and with Lauren and all of us. And so there's that. I'll say one moment of delight that just came to me. It's sort of funny or ironic. Ryan didn't have a lot of I forget what they're even called now, the stretch schools or the reach schools on his list, which is something I can talk about in a moment, but one of them, Wash U, okay? And we were talking when decisions started coming in, and he said, he's like, there was an optional essay to write for that, an additional optional supplemental essay, and I didn't write it. And I was like, dude, you are not getting in there. You know that, right? And it was just such a real moment because, and that is something that I would emphasize is important, to be super real with your kids, whether it's, depending on, your relationship with them. But So that, and I still laugh about it. And it was funny for him, and he wasn't offended, and like he knew, like that he's not going to get in there. You don't choose to write the optional essay. You're not getting in probably to a lot of places. So, and of course he did not get in, and it was all fine. So, I would say where you can bring in that just those real moments to the process can be helpful.
Also, it was just really great to see both the kids, just like how they were approaching it, and just like a lot of pride in seeing their growth when thinking about what school or what they were interested in or not interested in. And obviously, when acceptances come, but also when rejections come, like you do not want your kid rejected from anything, right? Like ever. I don't anyway. I'm like very typical kind of Jewish mother like that. And so I'm like, what do you mean you don't want my son? You know, and even when Lauren gave the list back for the score about who, I'm like, that's not a reach. Like anyone would be lucky to have, like just really kind of um silly in retrospect, but at the time it felt so real because you just want them to be in the best place wherever they can. And like Lauren says at the beginning of the process, is there is a school for everyone. And if you're at the school and it's not a fit, you could always transfer. Like none of these things are cemented in, like just to give it a go and just try to focus on the growth and like where they see themselves or where they think they want to be is exciting.
As Eitan said at the fall open house, it's just not that serious. So yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I mean, I do what I can at school to make it fun, as much as possible. They do get to hit a gong when they've got all their applications in, and whether they're admitted or denied places, they fill out raffle tickets for those decisions. And in another 2 weeks, we're going to have our big college closing where we have a bonfire and we burn some things if they want to print out rejection letters, test scores. It's often sort of math tests at this time of year, but let some things go from the end of senior year. And then we pull prizes from those raffle tickets, including, sweatshirts of their future alma mater from the rejection pool, right? So trying to keep this all in perspective because it is not personal. As Patty is referring to the fact that I'll put some admission predictions on lists and score over the summer. And that can be a real moment of, sort of the come to Moses, as it were, that, if 95% of your schools are admitting 5% of the applicants, we're gonna have some conversations and go back to the drawing board. And it's not because I don't want them to go to those very selective schools. It's that I don't want to engage in professional malpractice, right? I want them to go to college. So and I will also, to what Moti referred to about how at this point it can be kind of hard to say no to a place that said yes to you. I found that very interesting with this year's senior class, that there has been their own emotional attachment to multiple schools, right? And I almost feel like it's this like Marie Kondoing of their decisions where we have to sit together and be like, thank you, this school, for your offer. And now we are letting you go back into the universe. And it's sweet. And I think it's part and parcel of the type of kids we have at JCHS, that they even, have that sort of emotional resonance with some of their choices. Okay, one last question before we open things up for Q&A. So do you have a piece of advice that you would offer to folks at this moment in the process? Carrie.
Oh,
go, Carrie, go.
Okay. Two things. I'm going to echo what Moti said. Trust the process. Trust the process. Do not fight against it. Trust it. Trust Lauren. Trust your kid. Trust what is. You can't change what the reality is right now of the college admissions process. So trust it. And then I would say, like, set your student up for success. So help set your student up for success. And again, Lauren will help you do that so that there are some choices there. And in the end, like Moti said, it's binary. You only need one school. and that's fine. And it's nice to have choices. And like I said, there's an abundance out there. There are abundance of options. So stay open, be open to schools that you may have never heard of, or that when you were coming up and looking at colleges were not something you would have looked at. So be really open to that, because there are just an incredible number of, I mean, endless number of options out there that could be right for your kid. So stay open.
Yeah. I would say I would echo that and say try to first of all take a breath, because it's a journey, and I think looking back at what I had thought of this process back in April or May of last year, I've changed. My perspective has changed, and one of the things that to Carrie's point is that there's a school for everyone, and it's yes, it's important, it's their future, but it's not that huge of a deal what school they end up going. It's more important. And if you go with that, one other piece of advice would be also trust your kids and their instincts. And what we did, at least for the top schools that Eden was admitted to, is we went back. So again, talk about the enjoying and some brights. I mean, it was a fun, it's a whole different experience going to a school for admitted student days, and being pampered and everyone trying to, okay, if you only sign here, you get a sticker, or you get a green whatever, or a red lantern. So there's fun in that, and that kind of boosts up their ego, even if they don't end up going there. But also to the point of having to say no to some really prestigious school, we had to go again and just to check it out, and trust your kids' instinct, because sometimes a place could be great on paper. It was great in July when you toured it, when the school was empty, or when they they choreographed everything. But when you walk the halls, or you go in a class, or you go to the, for lunch, you don't get the same vibe. That's fine. There's other schools. So again, make sure that you've got options, but it's not that big. It's cool. And so I think that projects, because I can tell you one thing. I've been to many lunches, or at least four schools lunches over the last months for admitted students. Some of those parents are intense. I mean, I've heard conversations. It was, first of all, it's not my kid got accepted. We got accepted, and we got offers. And so and I just can't imagine their kids. I haven't seen their kids to kind of see, but you know, put it in proportions, being the adult in their lives, and trust their instincts, as well as kind of making that decision. It's not about just what rating the school came in and where they ranked. It's more about how you would feel and how they would see themselves walking the halls and finding their community.
Yeah. As with every answer, I totally agree with my fellow parents. And just, yeah, let them lead. They're going to have more insight into what's good for them. We had a situation where the school Eitan ended up choosing, which was UCLA, which, it's amazing that he got in. And, but we didn't care if he went there. Like, we just wanted him to pick the school that was best for him. And that's really how we approach the whole thing. And it's hard. It's not about you. It's really about them and what's good for them. And yeah, again, Lauren Cook, Lauren Cook, Lauren Cook. Just lean on Lauren. She'll get you through it.
I'll pay you all later. Oh, and look at the hearts. Okay, so Patty there mentioned where Eitan is going. Do you also want to mention his gap year?
Yeah, sure. So I had wanted our kids to go on a gap year years ago. I just thought it was a great opportunity, especially for Eliza, who really struggled academically. We just really wanted her to have, or I really wanted her to have like a year without academic pressure. And she ended up, she went on year course, which is Young Judea program that some of the kids at the school go to. And neither of my kids were interested in a gap year when I first brought it up, nor was my husband, by the way. So that was a process. I was like, what do you mean? You know, for me, it's such an amazing opportunity for them at this time in their life to just be on their own, learn about themselves. For us, it was important that it be in Israel. Um, so Lisa was there when the war started. That was not fun. And Eitan, we don't think that he really needed it as much as Lisa did, but he really wanted it. So, and he did the research. I had done a bunch of research before with Eliza because I literally had to kind of spoon feed it to her what her options were, because she just wasn't interested in thinking about it yet. But Eitan decided all on his own. He's doing the Bar Ilan Israel XP program. A couple of kids in Eliza's grade did that program, and he liked what they had to say. And it's in between like a yeshiva learning thing, which is super intense all the time, learning, learning, learning. And Eliza's, which was Young Judea, which is like almost all fun. There's like volunteer component, there's some academic component, but it's really like about having a great time. And he chose something in the middle, which is sort of modern Orthodox based. And it's in a campus setting. He wanted to be in a dorm. He wanted to be in Tel Aviv. So, he really looked into all that by himself.
And UCLA made it super easy. They've really evolved the process. He had to do, a form on the portal in April after he got in. He got approved like 2 weeks later and didn't even have to pay the enrollment deposit yet. He'll do that next year. So not all the UCs work like that, but UCLA, we've had a nice pattern of the gap years being possible. Modi, where's Eden going?
And then ended up choosing to go to Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, outside of an hour or so, an hour and a half outside of Boston, which is a liberal art, small academic, all women college, which she was concerned about the all women part, but it's part of a consortium. So there's four other schools: Amherst, UMass, Smith, Hampton, that are part of that consortium. So yeah, I think we're lucky that where she felt the most connection, starting the first tour, all the way to the admitted days where it kind of clicked. She was able to go there. Very exciting. No gap here. She's going straight in. I think the fact that she's moving halfway across the country is a big enough of a growing up and being on her own type of experience.
Great. And Carrie.
Ryan is taking a gap year, and I'll get to that in a moment. He is going to Union College, which is in Schenectady, New York, about 15-20 minutes from Albany, the capital of New York. And it's a small liberal arts school, about 2,100 students, with also an engineering school. So it's unique in that way. There are a handful of schools like that on the East Coast, particularly Lafayette, Lehigh, Bucknell. And Union is one of them as well. And it was not, at least for my husband and I, Ryan wasn't telling us what his leading top choice was, and he might not have even had one. Again, true to form, he had a couple of choices that he was really interested in. But we were really looking at Denver University. I'd reached out to Patty because Eliza goes there, and we loved it. And we'd been at Mid Students Day, and we said, this is it. This is, Eric and I, my husband, I said this, even though it wasn't about us. And then we did Admitted Students Day at Lafayette, which is where my husband went. We didn't want wanting to go there really. And then we went to Union, and we're like, why are we even going to Union? He should just go to DU. It's so awesome. It would be so great for him. Again, without saying all this to Ryan. And we went to Union. At the end of the day, we looked at each other and we thought, we hope he chooses union. And 5 days later, he didn't want to talk about it with us. We said, do you want our opinion or not? He said, no, not yet. And without ever soliciting our opinion, he texted us and in the morning and said, I'm choosing union. And it was probably one of the more mature things he's done in terms of going through that process and contemplating it. He said during a free period at school, he went out and was shooting baskets for like 45 minutes and he thought about it. So anyway, that's where he landed. He's not sure what he wants to study yet. He is interested potentially in engineering, so it will be an option. And it's okay though. He's multi-decided, as I love that, Moti, that you said. His gap year program, so a gap year was not his idea. It was our idea, and it was our idea in saying, we are the parents and we believe we know what's best for you and we want you to do this. And at first he said, why you make, you can't make me. And we said, well, we kind of can. And without shoving it down his throat or there being a big, fight, he sort of naturally got bought into the idea. So we think it's good for him because he's not necessarily young for his class. He just turned 18, but he probably should have taken a gap year between kindergarten or preschool and kindergarten at some point, just to give him some more time to marinate. And we want to give him that opportunity to go out into the world and have some experiences. So he's doing HMI, High Mountain Institute, for the first fall semester, which is a pretty intense outdoorsy program in the Rockies and in Patagonia, Chile. And then in the spring semester, he'll go on a program called Pacific Discovery, which is his is in Australia and New Zealand. And it's not as intense from an outdoors perspective, cultural discovery, kind of exploration. And I'm going to say one more thing. Ryan was offered merit money from Union, which was also one of the things in our, we loved that and it was generous. And we also feel like, wow, that's really helpful too. And sending him on a gap year because it makes up for what we weren't expecting him to get merit money. So I don't know, Lauren, if we're going to get into talking about merit, but wow, there's a lot of it out there.
Yes, and I will say, sometimes, and thank you all for talking about where they're landing. I will say, sometimes students or even parents box with me a little bit about having like a likely school or two on the list, or even a good range of possible schools, because we've got starry eyes about all the big brand names. But it's the likely and the possible schools that are going to throw merit money at your children because they are at or above the typical profile of their students there, and they can be excellent fits, right? That I think we sometimes conflate selectivity with quality, and that is not typically, or maybe always the case. So yes, the merit money is real. Likely and possible also means more like likely or possible to afford it. So keep that in mind. And there's a question in the chat which gets us into some of this. So the end of it is, do gap years impact financial aid opportunities? And I think generally no. Merit aid, need-based aid, that all would be offered to you after a year of deferral. You do have to, typically submit the enrollment deposit and say, I'll be coming in a year, and they'll check in with you, a few months later to make sure that's still your plan. But if you are into need-based aid, you do have to do the FAFSA, which is the free federal student aid form, every year that your child is in college, because things can change with family income for better or for worse, right? So they do adjust your package most years. So you should still be eligible for need-based aid unless you got a really amazing job and now suddenly don't qualify. So you would have to redo that. But otherwise, the offer that they're giving you senior year at JCHS should be good if you choose to defer for a year. But the rest of the question was around for families who need to seek financial aid scholarships, how did you or your child go about researching this aspect? How does siblings going to college impact this? Does anyone want to speak to that?
I can talk a little. I mean, go ahead, Patty.
Mine was about the gap year thing. So for both our kids, they were able to defer, and their merit, well, Elisa's merit package stayed intact, provided she didn't get a single credit. So, and the same was true with Aton. So some schools apparently are open to your kid taking like college level credits. But in our case, it would have invalidated the entire acceptance. So just to check into that, but they'll probably let you know.
Yep. And some gap years offer college credit, but you can choose whether to take it or not. So that is like whether to try and apply it or not. So it doesn't necessarily mean that some options are off the table, but that's something we can talk about. So yeah, Modi.
With regard to financial aid, that's where we had kind of a delineation of responsibilities or headaches or between me and Eden, and that was my domain. So with the guidance of Ms. Cook, and I would, reach out to the financial aid uh, teams at the appropriate colleges and have those conversations, right? And um, I would say we were lucky with Eden being the student that she is, that the schools that wanted her really wanted her, and they let her know. And it so happens to be the one that she wanted to. Um, and, but I would also say that also gave us some insight into the school spirit at times. Not that I shared that with her because I didn't want to project or to impact the decision, but sometimes the way they would interact, and I would being very, very cordial and very nice, and not from a demanding place, but just having a conversation. Um, Also, some I saw some differences. The merit and the financial aid sometimes, or most cases, I guess traditionally they sit in different offices. Merits is more admission. Financial aid has got his own office, but I've seen school where it kind of funnels into one person to kind of look at a family as a whole, and they have some ability if they really want you or to pull any of those levers. So again, no guarantees, and there were some schools that by design don't give any merits. Just being accepted is their philosophy of the merits, and it's fine. But yeah, so there are options. We did not pursue the outside of school merits. We looked at it. To me, it seems a lot of work for very small, 1,000, 2,000, $3,000 type of
You're speaking to outside scholarships. Yeah.
yes.
And I can give advice on that as we get into actual senior year, but also know that the types of schools I've suggested for your kids, if you filled out your questionnaire for me where there are some questions about is need a consideration, can I discuss it with your kid, what, all of that, I am trying to make informed suggestions for you, right? I'm not going to suggest some of the most expensive schools that don't give merit if need is a huge consideration for you. So let me help you as well, winnow down some of the choices. And I do have the privilege of looking at some range of financial awards that come in for kids each year. So I have a sense of who's getting more generous or who, I don't know, as folks ask me to interpret what's happening. So please, know that I'm a resource as you're trying to figure out what the right schools are in the list to make sure you can afford it. This is obviously a huge thing. Leora, you've patiently had your Zoom hand up. What's your question? It's all good as you find the mute button. All right, well, we'll take.
Okay, I got it.
Perfect. Do it.
I am the Golden Gate Bridge now. Okay, all right. See, clearly it's my first time on Zoom. Just I wanted to say thank you so much because you guys are clearly amazing parents. Just the way you talked about giving your students so much agency. And so I have a question about like your own process as a parent. I feel like this admissions process is like almost exactly the opposite of mine, 30 years ago. And I know Moti, yours was probably a little bit different in Israel, of course. How much, when not to share with your kid, but how much in your own process did you feel like you could be informed by your own experience. One thing that was helpful is that I didn't get admitted to very many schools, so I know I have in my own experience that you actually survive that. And, and so I'm just curious what, like, if you had any drawing on that. Thank you.
I think for me, I grew up in Northern California. At the time, my parents were like, you're going to go to a UC or a state school. And I did not have any exploratory process. My husband, on the other hand, grew up on the East Coast. He had a college advisor. They toured, so he and I came to it with very different perspectives. So I think for me, I was really into the idea of, wow, like what a cool thing to be able to explore all these different. You could live somewhere different. You could be in a small school, not, a big school and all of that. So I think that's how my own experience informed it.
Yeah, and I had a very different experience. I applied to one school, and as I like to joke with my kids, it was Hartford. So I went to University of Hartford in Connecticut, and when I told my grandma where I got in, she was like, "Oh," and I'm like, "No, no, no, not Harvard." So we just like always have that kind of running joke. Um, I was not a good student whatsoever, and so I didn't have at all a similar process as my kids. And I was very, very, very anxious, nervous with regard to Eliza. And I just, Lauren said there's a school for everyone, but I was so nervous given all the horror stories that we're always hearing about, the process and admissions. Like I was like, she's not going to get in anywhere. And not only, she got into like the majority of the schools she applied to and got merited. I didn't even know that was a thing. So that was very, very, very exciting and really great for her. And with Eitan, I was less concerned, and I really did kind of approach it like wherever he goes, they'll be lucky to have him, even though of course they're lucky to have Eliza as well, but just different. So I just have a lot of anxiety. So yeah, that was always present for me, as it is with pretty much everything, if that answers your question.
Yeah, for me, it was a whole different experience going to college, but that also helped me, or at least the realization early enough to say, and actually, Eden came to us early in the process and asked us a year ago, is this my process or yours? Who's driving this? Now I know she's unique in that sense, or not everyone is the same, but she wanted, so yes, she was driving and we were helping and nudging and making sure that, for example, even though she did not want to go to California, you know, we kind of compromised on having a UC in the mix just in case as a plan D. We're not going to talk about it. You're never going to have to go, but let's have an option that's more financially reasonable than a $90,000 private school. And if hopefully we never have to use that option. So there was guidance in that prospect, but again, from my perspective, we try to make it about her and kind of be the supportive person.
Thank you for that. And yes, we would call the UCs those who will not be named in our meetings. So it was kind of hilarious. I will just direct folks to Julie Beck's comment in the chat, noting that she is, while also a parent, the school counselor. So if you do need to process anything with her about the process, please do. And I do want to name, and really, unfortunately, both things are true, that the process is very different than when we all applied to colleges. It is more expensive. It is more complicated. There's just more paperwork and things are online and all the rest. And with certain schools, it is much more competitive. And I think where things really, the rubber hits the road is when people think about the UCs, that what might have been more accessible to Native Californians 20 years ago are not necessarily now, because there's so much competition. And also, there are 4,000 some colleges in the country, and there are lots of places that are affordable and that would love your kids and that are amazing. And, sometimes they get, well, I haven't heard of it, and think, well, they haven't heard of you. And we're all going to meet each other and, and see what our strengths are here. And the media is going to mess with your head too. I mean, I have a friend who loves to count the number of times. So I think last year, the New York Times wrote like 14 articles about Dartmouth and their like test, required process going back to needing testing and all this sort of stuff. When they didn't write any articles about, 20 other incredibly highly selective schools that have decided to say test optional, right? So the media is also going to direct our focus to certain places, and that will make the anxiety heightened. Very much unnecessarily. So I very much appreciate Carrie constantly saying, like, we can all take a breath. It's okay. So we've got lots in the chat and only 3 minutes here, but I do want to, yes, Leora, I also used a typewriter, which is really hard to, correct your errors. So we've got 2 things in the chat, and maybe I will just launch these out and see if any of you have commentary on it. One is if you could go back in time and give your child advice on how to make their applications stronger. And if your child was open to feedback, was there anything you suggested? And then there was also a question about, were any of your children thinking about applying anywhere early decision? Why or why not? So if you've got any thoughts on either of those questions, Patty, jump in.
I do, in the sense of early decision. I think it's amazing. I have friends whose kids did that, and it just they had their entire senior year be different. So that was fantastic, not to deal with all of the, the deadlines and the pressure, et cetera. I will say one of my friends, her kid got in early decision, and in retrospect, probably not the best school for the kid, and it was like a total reach and et cetera. So both sides.
Yeah, my son did not do early decision because he didn't have a number one choice. And so it just wouldn't have made sense for him. My older son did, he got deferred, didn't get in, whatever. But and then the second question is, I would not have any advice that I would give my son about how to change his application, because he is who he is. He was who he was. He did the things that he liked to do from an academic perspective and from a extracurricular perspective, and so that then is what was represented on his application.
Yeah, I would echo that as far as kind of going back in time. No, it wouldn't change anything. I think that's part of the process. On the ED side, um, we didn't want to do that, because of the financial aspect, because we wanted to see what are the options and not kind of commit up front. But also in hindsight, I think it was the right decision, because there was a lot of good in the process of having options that you admitted to, deciding and really reevaluating. I'm not sure that the decision would have been the same if she had kind of set her mind based on one visit 6 months ago, versus where she is today. So I think in all aspects, it turned out for the best.
Amazing. So I will say the strategy plan with applications, whether we're doing early action, early decision, that's really sort of as we get towards the end of the summer conversation, early fall, and I'm happy to work with your families through that. We always have somewhere between 4 and 7 kids that are thinking about early decision or the restricted early actions, all these flavors of plans. So we can talk about what might be best, because some students do have that, like, this is absolutely it. And most don't. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? Completely blanked on it. Oh, and in terms of like knowing what needs to be worked on with the application, all the rest, I will really be giving that feedback. So if your students are home during the summer, feel free to utilize me. It is a great time because I do have more time to help with reading, writing, or meetings. But also, my full attention is on them from the first day of school through, November 30th, really, as we get those UC CSU applications in. So I will just name it's 9 a.m. I'm so sorry, Inbar, but why don't you email me if you have a question that feels important to pass along. And I just want to thank our senior parents for continuing to relive all the things they've just been through and offer some advice and modeling as we've got in the chat. It's so lovely. And thank everyone for being here. And please shoot me emails, phone calls if you need more assistance as we continue with the process. So have a good day, everyone. Thank you.